Asia. Now we'll see the imperialism in Asia. Portugal, France and England first came to India for establishing trading contacts. The Portuguese were confined to Goa, Diu and Daman, and the French to Chandranagar, Pondicherry, that is Puducherry, Karikal and Mahe. It were the British who succeeded in conquering India. The East India Company was founded in London in 1600 AD. Gradually, they began to spread to all corners of India. Till 1740 AD, the British East India Company had restricted itself to trading activity alone. But due to political instability in India in the following years, the British started dabbling in Indian politics. The East India Company began to maintain small troops of its own. Mutual bickerings arising out of trade and the internal politics. In the court of Carnatic Nawab during the years 1740 AD to 1761 AD gave rise to confrontation between the French and the British. In the Carnatic War, the British gave a decisive blow to the French. In Bengal too, the British and the Nawab of Bengal were at loggerheads on the issue of trade concessions to be given to East India Company. In the Battle of Plassey, the British defeated the Nawab of Bengal in 1756. They secured Diwani rights to collect the revenues in Bengal. The remaining princely states were either annexed later on or existed only in the name. After the War of Independence in 1857, the East India Company's rules was replaced by the British Crown. In the second half of the 18th century, South India had the domination of the Nizam, Hyder Ali and the Maratha rulers. First, Hyder Ali and afterwards his son Tipu Sultan were defeated by the British in collaboration with the Nizam and the Marathas. Then, there had been 3 battles between the Marathas and the British, and the Maratha rulers were subdued. The Nizam accepted the subsidiary alliance system. Then, except for Sikh power, all princely states in India were under the British rule. The British could not do any damage to the Sikh reign as long as Maharana Ranjit Singh was on the throne. But after his death, the English Empire won the Sikh Empire. Then, Lord Dalhousie introduced doctrine of lapse and undertook the mission of merging the local princely states into the British Empire by rejecting the adopted successors in Jhansi, Nagpur, Satara, etc. In the 100 years, the entire region of India was brought under the governance of England. Then, the imperialism in China. China is the biggest nation in terms of population in the Asian continent. It was considered to be a dormant nation till the second half of the 18th century. It was the Manchu region which was held responsible for allowing a gigantic China to be brought under the reign of the Europeans. The Portuguese who came to China via the sea route were the first European traders there. They were allowed concession within the Canton port and later they captured the Macau port. Then the traders from France, England, Holland, Belgium, Russia, etc. acquired commercial concessions in China. Nevertheless, China didn't allow anybody to interfere into its internal region for almost 200 years. China began earning a lot of profit by virtue of selling tea, silk and China vessels. For the promotion of trade, the European traders in China established an organization named Kohong. In 1840, a war broke out between China and Britain on the issue of opium trade which China wanted to stop. The war was concluded by signing Treaty of Nanking which was imposed on China by Britain. Many restrictions and conditions were put on China. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain. This provided a permanent trading base to Britain. China had to pay a war indemnity of $21 million to Britain. The privileged status granted to Britain encouraged France to conclude a similar treaty which China did. The failure of the Chinese government enraged the people who rose in rebellion against their own government. The Taiping Rebellion was basically an expression of anti-foreign feeling in China. The treaty signed after the Second Anglo-Chinese War allowed the foreigners to travel in the interior. It granted more concessions to the western powers. Between 1870 and 1895, China lost control of Ryukyu Island, Annam, that is Vietnam, Burma, Myanmar, Sikkim and Korea. So far, the powers were mainly interested in commerce. Now, they became keen to make investments in China. This period witnessed the process of the division of China. It has often been described as the cutting of the Chinese melon. A constant interference in trade and religious matters by the Westerners proved to be a major factor in creating discontent among the Chinese. They gave expression to their resentment in the form of Boxer Rising. It was clearly anti-foreign reaction. It was suppressed and China was looted by the imperialist powers. Next, Japan and imperialism. Japan, land of rising sun, was an isolated country that was closed to foreigners. In 1853, Commodore Perry, an American naval officer, first entered into Japan and a commercial treaty was forced on her by the United States. Considering the extent and strength of Perry's navy, then the Japanese Prime Minister Tokugawa Shogun signed a business agreement with America at Kanagawa. In this way, the non-aligned status of Japan came to an end, and on the basis of the granted concessions, the imperial nations prepared themselves to exploit Japan. It was during this period that the unrestrained shogun governance was subverted by the Meiji Revolution. Japan modernized itself by drastically changing the economic, political and social fields, seeking motivation from the scientific and artistic development with which the European nations had defeated Japan. And finally, Japan became a powerful imperial nation in Asia.